Terminus, an abandoned island turned into a haven for the most unnatural experiments in the middle of nowhere. Doesn't sound very safe to me, so I feel like we do have to check out how safe this island actually is for its employees. And what better place to do that than on Safety Check? So today I'm going to be ranking Terminus on its safety, so let's not waste any more time. Welcome back to Safety Check. Okay, we are so back. We are in the lovely Terminus. It's interesting, to say the least. Now, I've identified a lot of hazards for this place, as you can imagine. So let's just jump right into it, shall we? Let's get into the low tier risks. And the first one we're going to mention is tripping hazards. Now, at first glance, it might not look like there's a lot of tripping hazards around here, but there are. Come out to the courtyard. You have railings that have just fallen onto the floor. You could definitely catch your feet on one of those. You've got pallets all over the floor that you could trip over and hurt yourself. And I mean, do I need to say anything else about all these loose cables just going everywhere across the floor? I mean, if you can't spot this from a mile away, then I don't know, man. I don't know. But it's definitely cause for tripping over. And you might think if I come down into the mine shafts, I might be alright. Nope, there's wood and sandbags all over the floor. I mean, there's baskets here that you could trip over. There's plenty on this map that you could trip over. So we are going to give it an overall rating of 70 out of 100. Next up on the list, we have Hygiene for this map. Now, compared to some maps, it's not terrible, but we still do see some elements of bad hygiene around. And one example of this is the blood stains that are all over the floor. God damn it, my round just ended. Why did the zombie die on me? All right, let's get through this quickly then. There's blood on the floor in a lot of places. And I mean, I'm walking in here. This is the cafeteria where there's blood on the floor and guts on the floor as well. And speaking of the cafeteria, all this food has just been left. You're telling me they don't get rats around here with that food just left out on the counter? And look down here. There's guts coming out of the boxes and the crates. That is not good by any means. So hygiene is definitely an issue on this map. And it is going to get an overall rating of 70 out of 100. Okay, the next thing we have to talk to, which is really obvious right now, is the weather elements. Right now, it is tipping it down with rain. So I'm getting soaked, which obviously makes me very cold. But, you know, that's the least of my problems because you can hear and see the thunder and lightning around. Like, what happens if I'm just out here and I get hit by one of those beams striking down around the island? It would not end very well for me. So weather elements is going to get an overall rating of 40 out of 100. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is actually equipment around the map. Now, when I'm talking about equipment, I'm not talking about like machinery stuff. I'm talking about like actual equipment that they're using in their experiments, etc. Like all of these knives that have just been left out and the hammer. I mean, I know they were torturing people with this, but come on. And look at all these batteries and stuff that they could be using equipment wise. That could definitely be an issue. And then you've got this shed where you've got all this equipment, like this thing here. Like you could press your hand in there or something. That could really hurt. All this equipment on the tables. I'm sure you could definitely cause some harm with all of these. And that's without going down to the lab at the bottom. Because look down here. Look at all this experimenting they're doing on people down here. You know this stuff is going to be deadly. So yeah, I'm going to say equipment is definitely a factor here. And it is going to get a 70 out of 100. Now we have one more low tier risk to mention on this map. And it's once again shrapnel. You're right. We cannot avoid shrapnel on these maps as a safety risk. It seems to constantly be an issue. And it's not going away anytime soon. For example, in this room here, this window has a bunch of broken glass around it. That's pretty dangerous. And then if we, you know, take a little trip to our favorite big boat over here in the distance, don't worry, we'll mention the boat later. But it doesn't take a genius or a detective to see that there's loads of glass again broken on the floor and over on this one as well. So yeah, shrapnel is still an issue on this map as well, and it is going to get an overall rating of 70 out of 100. With that said and done, we can get on our trusty little boat and we can get back to the mainland. And on the mainland, I want to talk about our next risk, which is actually the first medium tier risk of the map. And it actually relates to falling, because there are plenty of places that you can fall and potentially really hurt yourself. Like up here, for example. I can just jump off this if I want to. And whilst I was very lucky to not hit the ground there, if I'm a little bit closer in, that's going to really hurt. And you can do this on sections that are a bit more dangerous as well. But one of the biggest risks is actually falling off here. I mean, I know this barrier is in place, but you can jump over that. Like, there's nothing stopping you. So falling is definitely a really big risk on this map. And for that reason, it is going to get a 30 out of 100. Okay, so we got our next medium tier risk now. And this is actually machinery this time. Now, there is a forklift just stuck here, which could be a risk, you know. That's a risk in its own. But then you also have things like the elevator. This is a lift, right? And I just fell down it, which I didn't want to do. So now I'm going to miss it. But this thing, look at the size of it. Look how much effort goes into actually taking that up. You're telling me that that looks like it's in good condition? Should it really be making all those sparks, you know? Probably not. Things like that can't go unnoticed. So it is going to get a 50 out of 100. Now, next up on the list, we're going to talk about the building stability. Now, I don't have many gripes with the actual building itself. It's in pretty stable condition. But these caves are what concern me. Now, they don't look too bad, don't get me wrong. But then if you come over to this side in the mine itself, it starts to get a bit more risky because you have sections that are starting to look a bit wear and tear-esque, especially when all these beams of wood have like clearly fallen off the top as well. And you see sections like this is caved in. This wasn't meant to be here originally, and you can see the background as well. Like, these caves are definitely starting to fall apart on themselves for sure. And if this section caves in, a lot of the island caves in. So whilst it's not an immediate risk now, it is going to get a 70 out of 100 because it could be a concern. Moving on from that, we can move on to another medium tier risk. I know, plenty of medium tier risks in this one. And it's actually going to be chemical hazards. Now, as you can see, there's lots of chemical containers on the map, like for petrol and barrels, which isn't good. You've got all these propane tanks, which could definitely be an issue. And whatever these are as well, these don't look like they're safe. Like we said, with things like the weather elements and stuff, we can't just have all these barrels out because they could be a real concern and possibly cause some issues. And when you come to the lab, I mean, I think we all know what that sign means. It basically means it's not good. Don't go near it. And you have plenty of these around the lab, so it can definitely be a bit of a concern. So chemical hazards is definitely going to have to go on the list, and it is going to get an overall rating of 50 out of 100. Now, next up, and our final medium tier risk of the map is actually electrocution. Now, on the surface, it doesn't look that bad, this map, but there are little elements which make me kind of concerned. One example of this are the little sparks of electricity that come out of these wires. There you go. I did catch it. I didn't think I was going to show you there for a second. I thought it wasn't going to do it again, but you saw what I meant. Another example is this generator, the ether generator. There's a lot of electricity sparking off that, which is a bit of a concern in my opinion, because it's not covered by anything and we can just freely walk past it. And then once again, you have little things like these sparks that you can hear. They're definitely a bit concerning, especially when the way I activate it is touching this. I don't want to be touching that if it's sparking like that. So yeah, I'd say electrocution is definitely still a bit of an issue. So it is going to get a 60 out of 100. So now we can move on to our high tier risks. And the first one I actually want to mention is in this room here, which I'm just going to show you. What has happened to this poor zombie? Apart from me killing it, it's been crushed. It's been crushed by this massive cabinet that's fallen on top of them. And not only a cabinet's an issue, I mean, look how poorly these boxes are stacked. You could get crushed under those boxes. And then when you look at this shipwreck, you've got all these container units that are just kind of hanging on for dear life. And some of these are open. All of this could fall out and crush me. So there's plenty of things on the map that could potentially cause you some deep bodily harm by crushing you. And this is a high tier risk, so it does have to be categorized as a high tier risk. And it is going to get a 10 out of 100. Okay, this is our next high tier risk. And I think it's a pretty obvious one. It's the water. You have an incredibly high chance of drowning on this map because the majority of it is covered by water. You can access the water easily and you can swim around in it. And let's be honest, this is probably the highest contender ever for a drowning risk. And for that reason, I cannot give it any leeway in the rankings. It has to get a 1 out of 100 because the water is everywhere and there's no avoiding it. Speaking of the water, I'm going to speak of something that's in the water, which is also our first miscellaneous risk of the map, and it's Patient 13. Now, lucky for me, Patient 13 actually hasn't popped out today to say hello yet, which is nice of him, because I don't really want to see him. But we all know what Patient 13 looks like, and we all know the harm that this guy can cause us, whether he's poisoning us with gas or just trying to, you know, take us out with his tentacles or his massive electric charge. Whatever way you want to look at it, he is really dangerous, and for that reason, Patient 13 is getting a 5 out of 100. Now, we just mentioned tentacles, and that's actually going to relate to our next miscellaneous tier risk, and it's going to be the tentacle traps that are on the map. Now, these things have a high chance of killing you if you get caught in them. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not easy to get stuck in one of these, but if you activate one of these traps and then you accidentally walk under it, you know, you can get caught, and if I let it consume me, I get down. So it's definitely a concern, but like I said, it's only a concern if you activate it. So for that reason, it is going to get a 50 out of 100. So next one I want to talk about is back in the mines, and it is the minecarts. Now, there is no safety features in place to stop these minecarts from going down these tracks. I mean, this one just collapsed on its side halfway down, which isn't good. And what if something happens and I'm running up this track and all of a sudden a minecart hits me as I'm running up? That could definitely hurt. And a matter of fact, it would do more than hurt. It would really do some damage. For that reason, I am going to give it a 50 out of 100. Now, we have one final miscellaneous tier on the island itself, and it's actually the bombs that are on this island. Now, if you've done the Easter egg, you know that there is a step where Modi activates the bombs that are on Terminus Island, which obviously would completely annihilate the island and yourself. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't feel safe knowing that there's just, you know, practically nuclear warheads and bombs just on the island that could be activated with the flick of a switch. I don't know how I feel about that. They're definitely a very big risk, and for that reason, it's actually going to get a 5 out of 100. Okay, we have got to our final miscellaneous risk of the video. And if you guessed the big old shipwreck that's off the side of the island, then you would be correct, because this is our last miscellaneous risk. This boat is obviously not in very good condition anymore. I mean, it's shipwrecked. The whole thing is falling apart. There's a massive hole in the bottom of it. And if I'm honest, I can't see it being long till this thing is completely underwater. Yet here we are, just roaming on it like nothing's happened with it. So I definitely have to consider this as a risk. And it is going to get a 50 out of 100. But that is where we conclude the risks for the map. And now we can move on to the safety features of the map. Now, one thing that you might notice on this ship that is intact are all the railings. There are plenty of railings keeping us safe on this boat. And not only this boat, there are also loads of railings along the island, which you guys have definitely seen as you've gone past. I mean, they are pretty much everywhere, and a very small minority of them have actually been broken. So I am going to actually class safety railings as a safety category for this map, and it's going to get a 2.5. Now, the next safety feature of the map is actually fire safety, something that we do not get very often. As you can see here, there's a fire hose, you know, to help us put out fires, you know, which is what you want. And that's not the only fire hose on the map. There are others as well. Like, for example, over here, there's another fire safety hose, which is great because that's what we want. And there's also fire extinguishers as well, which is another element of fire safety. So I think I can comfortably say, I think for the first time, that fire safety is actually going to get a rating on this map, and it's going to get a plus 2.5. And now we have one more safety feature. I know, 3 safety features on one map. I think this might be a first, but it's going to be all the safety signs on the map. Now, unlike most maps, there are actually safety signs on here, which is good to see for once. At least some safety is finally being taken into consideration. For example, you have a hazardous sign here. You also have an electrocution sign here. And here in the mines, these, while I can't understand them, I'm pretty sure that means don't smoke. And that means please wear a helmet to stay safe, aka a safety sign. So safety signs are definitely an element of this map, and it's going to get a 2.5 for that. But with that said and done, that is all of the risks and safety features identified on this map. And just to recap on those features, we have tripping hazards with a rating of 70, hygiene with a rating of 70, weather elements with a rating of 40, equipment with a rating of 70, shrapnel with a rating of 70, falling with a rating of 30, machinery with a rating of 50, building stability with a rating of 70, chemical hazards with a rating of 50, electrocution with a rating of 60, being crushed with a rating of 10, drowning with a rating of 1, patient 13 with a rating of 5, tentacle traps with a rating of 50, the ship with a rating of 50, bombs with a rating of 5, and the minecarts with a rating of 50. Now, when you put all of these together, you actually get an overall average of 44 out of 100. But then you do have to take into consideration, we had over 10 risks on the map, which means it gets a -5. And we also had over 5, or on this instance, exactly 5, high tier risks. And that, of course, being any risk that gets 30 or below. So that's a -5 as well. But on the plus side, it did have the free safety features, which was railings, warning signs, and fire safety. And that gives it a +7.5. So when you do put all these together, you actually get an overall rating of 41.5 out of 100. Yes, Terminus has just scored just above 40 points. Which, if I'm honest, I'm not surprised. It's one of those maps that's safe but not safe at the same time. And when you take that into consideration, Terminus is actually at the bottom of the at-risk category. Lower than Shangri-La. Who would have thought? We definitely need some crew to come in and make this map a bit safer. But with that said and done, that is the end of today's video, where we have gone through and ranked the safety of Terminus Island. Now, before I go, I do just want to say a massive thank you to the channel members. The extra support is greatly appreciated. And of course, if you want to become a member today, then that will also be amazing. But apart from that, if you have enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content on Black Ops 6, and I will leave you with the final message of Safety Check, which is, of course, stay safe.